Hello. For our project, we will be talking about Internet Service Providers, or ISPs for short. First off, I will explain what an ISP is, what they do, and the different types of ISPs. So, an Internet Service Provider is an organization that provides services that allow people to access or use the Internet. Most ISPs are commercial businesses that connect users to the Internet after the user pays a fee, and this fee is usually monthly or reoccurring. ISPs connect users to the internet by installing cables in the ground usually, and these cables transmit data to the customer's location. Some companies that are ISPs include Comcast, AT&T, Suddenlink, and Google. ISPs typically provide certain services to its users, with the most important service being internet access. However, they also include some other services. Some of these are internet transit, which connects a smaller ISP to the larger internet, web hosting, which allows a person or group to make a website accessible to the internet to allow others to access that website. Co-location is a service where storage space and bandwidth are rented out to customers, so it's similar to the cloud. And there's many other services also provided by ISPs. There's a few different classifications for ISPs. The most popular one is an access provider. An access provider provides internet access to a customer, whether that be through cables in the ground or through wireless access, such as cellular data. An access provider can make use of different types of cables depending on the customer's needs. So a customer that doesn't need much bandwidth can use cheaper cables to transmit that bandwidth, and a customer that needs higher bandwidth can use more expensive cables for that. So it just depends on what kind of needs the customer has. Mailbox providers are organizations that provide services for hosting email domains. So these services include having mail servers to send, receive, accept, and store emails for users. Hosting ISPs make use of web hosting services and online storage services such as cloud services to allow users to host things on the internet. Transit ISPs make use of internet transit, so a smaller ISP can pay a larger ISP to allow the smaller one to access other parts of the internet. Virtual ISPs purchase services from another larger ISP and provides those services to its own users. And free ISPs allow the user to access the internet free of charge. Sometimes they display advertisements, however, when the user is accessing the internet. And finally, wireless ISPs provide internet based on wireless networking. So this has been a short overview of internet service providers.
Howdy, I'm Colin Marshall from Team 3, and I'm going to talk about data protection. So data protection is important to every company, and most companies cannot afford their operations to be halted because of data breach. And that's why every company needs to implement specific precautions to avoid this from happening. So why is it so important to protect your data? Well, studies show that 93% of companies that lose their data for more than 10 days file for bankruptcy within 1 year of the disaster, and 50% of those companies file for bankruptcy immediately. This is why not implementing the proper security could not only be devastating, but could also be a company-ending event. More and more companies every day are using a cloud-based server, and actually the company that I work for has a cloud-based server, and it's great from protecting from natural disasters and human error, things like deleting files or accidentally overwriting files. But one thing that could potentially be threatening about a cloud-based server is not protecting it from internal threats, which is usually not thought about at first. But internal threats could potentially bring the company to an end. Imagine an employee who is mad and knows he's probably going to get let go, and he decides to either steal or wipe all the information from the cloud. And if successful, the company could be over because of a very angry employee. And there is way too much risk in not protecting your data from even someone who might not seem like a threat. So how can you protect from internal threats? It's simple. Only provide employees to specific data that they absolutely need to access for their operations. You have to enforce authorization. You have to set blocks and prevent anyone from being anywhere in the cloud that they shouldn't be. I take my company for an example. I work for a water company where I have to go around the city of Houston and check in these plants. And I log them into my phone on our app, which is cloud-based, and that is essentially all I need to get my job done, and there's no reason for me to be anywhere else accessing other data that's not necessary for me to finish my job. So I definitely think that internal threats need to be thought about when it comes to protecting your data. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Clarissa. So today I'm going to be talking about what a data cap is, what it's imposed for, and what the results of data caps are. A data cap, or better known as a bandwidth cap, is a service provider imposed limit on the amount of data transferred by a user account at a specified level over a given time period for a specified fee. The term both applies to home internet service and mobile data plans. Data caps are usually imposed as a maximum allowed amount of data in a month for an agreed upon charge. So, as a rule, when the user exceeds that limit, they are charged at a higher rate for further data use. However, sometimes the provider may not charge an overage fee, but instead, force the users to transfer their rate per second beyond the time limit. So, for example, let's say you have a provider such as Verizon, and you have 1 gigabyte of 4G LTE and plan, and you exceed that limit between the time you were given that and your next period for your bill period. Now that will be downgraded to 3G once you hit that 1 gigabyte limit for the rest of the period until you reach your next billing period. So an ISP also might impose a data cap when a customer shares access with many users. So that includes, that employs file sharing software or otherwise break terms of use. Service providers also sometimes impose data caps when they have a monopoly in a given area. Data caps result in lower rates of access to online materials, especially in multimedia and streaming content, which is a problem for content creators and their advertisers. T-Mobile reported recently that users with capped or throttled data use 20 to 30 times less data, and 37% of subscribers avoided streaming media because they were afraid to exceed their limits. And myself, that I have Verizon Wireless, I'm always at school using the Wi-Fi, so I never really go over streaming the media, or but there have been times that I do go over because I'm not at home or I'm not at school, and I use social media, YouTube, things like that. That's what really carries your data over. And last but not least, data caps are also uniformly unpopular with customers. As being unpopular with customers, the result of that is service providers often refer to data caps by other names such as fair usage or fair access policies, or usage-based billing, or vaguely as band caps.
So net neutrality means consumers can go wherever they want, whenever they want, and they don't need to ask for permission to develop whatever products or services that they want to develop. And it means that broadband providers, they can't block, throttle, or create special fast lanes for any content. The FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, created rules that were adopted on February 2015 to maintain an open internet, which means that they're going to protect and maintain that open, uninhibited access to legal online content without the broadband providers being allowed to block, impair, or establish fast or slow lanes, as long as it's access to lawful content. These open internet rules went into effect on June 2015, and they ensure consumers and businesses fast, fair, open access to the internet. The rules apply both to fixed and mobile broadband service on whatever device you access it with. The three main rules, as I said, were no blocking, no throttling, and no paid prioritization. No blocking means that they can't block access to legal content, application services, or non-harmful devices. No throttling means that they can't impair or degrade lawful internet traffic on basis of content, applications, services, or non-harmful devices. And then no paid prioritization just means that ISPs can't favor different lawful traffic over another lawful traffic in exchange for some consideration of any kind. So in other words, that means no fast lanes. And that rule also bans ISPs from prioritizing content and service of their affiliates. And the FCC also said that they can't make blanket findings about whether to allow data caps to limit the bandwidth broadband providers' customers' use. Some data caps can benefit customers because they allow wireless operators to offer a variety of service plans at different price points. And the FCC won't ban data caps, but consumers and other internet companies can lodge complaints about certain data cap policies they feel are unfair, which the FCC will examine on a case-by-case basis.
Hey, what is up? My name is Andy Mendoza. I'll be talking about America's internet infrastructure and how it relates to the world's. So first off, let's get to the start. Every computer is connected to the internet as a part of a network, just like the one in your home. For example, you may use a modem and you dial a local network through your internet service provider. So at home, that might be part of a local network, but you're still likely to connect through an ISP that your company has, dealt with. So when you connect to the ISP, you become part of their network. The ISP may connect to a larger network and become part of their network. So the internet's essentially a network of networks. Most large companies, however, have their own dedicated backbone in connecting various regions. So each region, the company has a point of presence, so a POP. The POP is a place for local users to access the company's networks, often through a dedicated line. The amazing thing here is that there's overall no controlling networks. Instead, there are several high-level networks connecting each other through a network access point, or an AP. For example, here, the National Science Foundation created the first high-speed internet backbone in 1987. They called it the NSFnet. It's a T1 line that is connected to 170 smaller networks. Backbones are typically fiber optic trunk lines, which means the trunk line has multiple fiber optic cables connecting through them to increase the capacity. Fiber optic cables are designated for OC, for an optical carrier. Optical carrier, for example, optical carrier 3 is capable of transmitting about up to 155 megabits per second, and OC48 can transmit up to 2,488 megabits per second. 2004, which makes it for 2.48 gigabits per second, compared to a 56K modem transmitting only about 56,000 bits per second. You can see how fast a modern backbone really is. So let's look at America's internet infrastructure and how that compares to the world's. So first off, our internet infrastructure is fundamentally kind of broken, alright? So it's a marketplace first, so which means that there's a physical location for fiber optic cables, financial deals that direct all the traffic down each specific set of wires. If you think of wires as maybe roads, you can see that the setup is something like a city streets, city highways, and interstates. In internet terms, those are kind of roads and called tiers. Like we said in the first one, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. These networks are stacked across the US's continent and spanning throughout the networks. So tier 1, like we said, is the internet's most powerful backbone. It makes up the lower defining core of the internet. The second, tier 2 networks connect each other with each other and the internet backbone to make it more efficient for the packets of data to reach the destination. And in the US, there's a problem with the last tier, and those are for two reasons. So first is technically restraints holding back the bandwidth, and second is a lack of competition between most carriers selling the internet service to the end user. So in America, the telecommunication infrastructure relies on outdated technology, right? It runs over the same copper cables invented by Alexander Graham Bell back 150 years ago. The copper infrastructure is made up with twisted, pair coaxial cables, and it was originally designed to carry out television and cable services, meaning that it's not really meant for the internet and high video traffic. And that costs a ton of money to upgrade each home into something fiber like Google Fiber. It costs tens of thousands per mile, and you'll hear more about with Careem, but here's the kicker. All right, the last infrastructure is controlled by the oligarchy of all the three big cable companies, including Time Warner, Verizon, and Comcast. And basically, if you're an American, for example, 1 of 3 Americans only have access to one option of internet service in their area, and then most people usually just have one of the 3. So it's not like they have an option of choosing which one is the best service because it's controlled by them most of the time. So without competition, there's no incentive for internet providers to improve their infrastructure, right? There's a massive telecom companies bottleneck the last service for us, and they don't need to upgrade their critical infrastructure. So the internet here is a very slow and expensive compared to other parts of the world, right? Companies like Verizon do the bare minimum to stay in compliance with the FCC, and Aldo will talk about that later. There's the option of building networks from the ground up, as seen as a startup in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where they did a few years ago. Starting this year, the government is starting to give out federal compensations towards municipal broadband projects. So in the future, we could see some people try improving our infrastructure themselves and taking it away from people like Verizon, Comcast, and Time Warner. Thank you for listening to me. I'll pass it on to somebody else later in this thing. Thank you.
Howdy. So I'm going to touch a little bit on Google Fiber and its relationship with ISPs or internet service providers. So first we need to know a little bit about Google Fiber. What Google Fiber is, it's an internet and television service that's offered by Google. So it's sort of been, but nowadays it's become a branch for Alphabet Inc., which is just a separate entity that Google's been providing for. A little bit about Google Fiber that is really appealing to people. It has a blistering fast rate of 1,000 megabytes per second, a gigabyte pretty much, of uploading for all the channels. So, the service, it has television channels, it can even give you internet service. So this directly has a competitive edge against internet service providers. So currently Google Fiber's, biggest flaw you could say is that it's new. It's not available everywhere. It's only available in certain areas. Mainly you can find that on their website, fiber.google.com, but it's not everywhere. But when it does pop up somewhere, the ISP in the area immediately gets some sort of competition, some sort of fear a little bit. They have to sort of reevaluate their business practices because Google Fiber's biggest hit with consumers and everything is that speed, and some ISPs just can't compete with that. So Google currently plans to expand Google Fiber. It's still in the works. Again, there's more information on fiber.google.com. A little bit of their plans, they vary based on the consumers, the plan that they enroll in. So for an example, the website that I checked with for Google Fiber, it says for $70 a month you can get 1 gigabyte per second internet, fast upload speeds, fast download speeds. Again, that's a direct competition with ISPs. So with Google Fiber, what they do is they'll give you the box, and they'll, you enroll with Google, and with the box, it can give you either TV or internet. It uses fiber optic communications, which is a lot of what telephone users, internet users providers nowadays are beginning to use. A lot of it's going with with fiber optics. That's where a lot of it's shifting to nowadays. So in the meantime, while consumers are waiting for Google Fiber to expand, some of the things people are doing is just they're sticking with their ISPs. But as more and more people become unhappy, with Comcast, even Suddenlink, as we can see in College Station, they begin to explore alternatives to their internet. So Google Fiber is proving to be a really, really, it seems pretty attractive to consumers. So that's something that we all, as technology management majors, I think can take away from, is that we need to see that ISPs and things like fiber optic communications are really beginning to rise and are beginning to be something that that we need to take a look at and understand. Thanks.